Hey guys, first Regardsman here, and I'll be talking about every single melee weapon in Space Marine 2 patch 13, including the heroic ones. Now, we'll be ranking these all in a tier list here, and a lot of people have asked me to compare like the main relic tier options with the heroic variants. So today we're going to try that a bit instead, starting off with the Power Axe. Now, the Power Axe got added back in patch 10. This thing has received multiple buffs since then. The block variant got access to the Power Backstep and Power Wave, and also recently in patch 13, they finally fixed the Power Wave to hit the proper amount of enemies, and this weapon was already like a top tier option in the game, but the improved Power Wave hitting multiple enemies is very strong now. We also got a brand new heroic item we'll talk about in a second here with the Encarmine Axe. But as far as this one is concerned, the Power Axe, I think this one goes into S tier. The only thing this is bad at is like contested health recovery, as opposed to like a Chainsword or maybe even like a Thunder Hammer for like direct Nova damage. But for the most part, the Power Axe stagger on the Power Backstep is incredible. This weapon firmly belongs in the S tier in my opinion, and there's really only like 2 weapons in the entire game that I put over this one currently, and like that's including heroics, so a really strong option. Next weapon here is the Thunder Hammer. Now, the Thunder Hammer has had a troubled history. This is a weapon that is famous in Warhammer 40k, and for the longest time, this one kind of sucked in damage, but we got a few buffs to this one, the biggest one being back in like patch 10, where they increased the area of effect radius on this thing to basically just be a 50% bonus and have a much easier time hitting things like Enlightened Zangors and Chaos Spawn, and just like obliterating hordes in general. The Thunder Hammer these days is very strong. I actually think this weapon is one of the best options in the entire game for Chaos, especially because those wide area of effect ground slams and things like Aftershock, they will slam apart the Enlightened Zangors very easily. They have a very easy time at clearing out some of the more obnoxious enemies to hit, and for that reason I think this one goes firmly in the top of A. You know, you could definitely put this in S tier if you wanted to. I don't know if I'd say it's quite there even with like the balance and block version, but that being said, Thunder Hammer is very strong. If you want to put an S, I can't disagree with you, but for me, I just put like the top of A. The next weapon here is the Chainsword. Now, the Chainsword is, in my opinion, like tied for the worst melee weapon of the relic tier options in the game currently. It is not bad, okay? Let's be very clear. The Chainsword is not bad in Space Marine 2. This weapon definitely functions, especially on classes like Vanguard, where you can take full advantage of perks like Swift Recovery for double CHP regen on your heavy attacks. And if you're unaware what CHP regen means, we're talking about contested health recovery, because this weapon has a perk that gives you double contested health recovery on every heavy attack, and because of that, if you're playing a class like Vanguard with a 50% bonus in base with their starting perk, it's very easy to just clear out Minotaur's hordes with that. And also, the block Chainsword has a very easy time just like one comboing guys off of a combo skip. But that being said, the other melee weapons like the Power Fist, Power Axe, Thunder Hammer, all these are far better than the Chainsword is these days, and the utility of the Chainsword has kind of been lost over time, so I would probably say this one goes down to like maybe B or C tier. I do think there's one other melee weapon. I know I said it was tied, but like there's one I might actually put below this. So I'd say Chainsword goes into B. It's not bad. Like there was a really good Chainsword option, but those are related to the heroic tier. But as far as the relic tier options are concerned, the Chainsword goes into B for me. Maybe you disagree, but that's where I'm putting this one. Next one here is the Power Sword. Now, the Power Sword is another weapon in Space Marine 2 that's had a bit of a troubled history. This weapon had terrible damage on launch. The fencing variant was pretty much the only good one, and that was only because you could play it on Bulwark and just parry spam over and over for like gun strikes on Assault or the Bulwark class with Intimidating Aura, and because of that, it really wasn't a functional weapon that much on its own. But these days, it has received multiple buffs. The balance buff upped the damage tremendously on the balance relic tier options. The block Power Sword is very strong now for things like Power Whirl, and in patch 13, they buffed up the attack speed of all of these variants, including the heroic one we'll get into shortly, and I would say the Power Sword firmly goes into A now. I think this weapon is actually better than Chainsword, and where this one seriously struggles is like the CHP regen, but that doesn't matter too much because the classes that use the Power Sword don't really care that much about that anyways, because they are just kind of monstrous with this weapon, because the Bulwark is top tier anyways, and the Assault class, he is super mobile, can take full advantage of things like Power Rake, and one of the strongest options on this weapon in general is the ability to not only have like massive horde clear off power whirl and power style, but also have incredible amounts of range damage, because your power rake does count as a range attack pretty much. It can hit things like zone thropes and neurothropes, and that is made even better on the Xenophase Blade we'll get into in a bit. Next weapon here is the combat knife. This is the worst one in the game. I'm putting this one, actually I'm putting it in D tier. There is no reason to use the Relic tier combat knives in this game anymore, because the Argent Edge and the Power Gladius are just strictly better versions of like all the combat knife options on the Relic tier. The only one you might possibly use is the block version if you really want to use a block variant of the combat knife, but that's just not as strong as the other options. And I really do think this one has been totally power crept. The base versions really need like a rework or something, because the heroic variants are so damn strong for this weapon that there is just like no point to take a normal combat knife anymore. So I'm putting that down into D tier. Now the next weapon here is the Omnissian Axe. This weapon is very strong. I would almost put this one the S tier, but the thing is, the Tech Marine is like the only class that can use this weapon, and that's also a good thing, because he's the only class that could ever use this weapon effectively as well, because the way the Omnissian Axe works is that your heavy attacks like Discharge and like your massive double slams, these are only really functional in Tech Marine thanks to his no animation gun strikes, because you can stagger enemies after a parry into your own charge attacks and just like double combo one-shot Majoris in the game. The horde clear on this weapon is incredible. The charging attack is amazing to just like ram through Minoris enemies and get armor back relentlessly, and I would say this could definitely be argued an S tier weapon, but it does fall off a little bit where like some of the other weapons do not. So I would say it also goes into like the top of A. I think like this and the Thunder Hammer are both very powerful attacks, and I'm also pretty sure the Thunder Hammer and the Omnissian Axe have the same hitbox. Now for the next melee weapon, we do take the Power Fist here. Now the Power Fist is the best weapon in Space Marine 2 still. This weapon is cracked. The block Power Fist is incredible on Bulwark and Assault. The balance Power Fist is also incredible on these classes, because the cleaving potential there is just tremendous, and the base damage is actually higher than the block weapon. The Power Fist is a range weapon effectively. If you're unaware, the charge attacks of this weapon with the Tide of Battle perk will give you a 20-meter range on your thrust jabs, which basically makes your Power Fist a ranged weapon that punches Zoanthropes and Neurothropes out of the sky. You can cleave multiple enemies, one-shot Majoris on hard strats and Absolute. This weapon has been top tier for ages. Hell, the Power Fist was top tier back in like patch 8, and they buffed up the block version. They've also buffed the balance version since then, just like they buffed the Power Axe. So Power Fist, S tier, best weapon in Space Marine 2 overall. There are other weapons that perform better than the Power Fist in like some particular scenarios. Like sometimes the Power Axe stagger can be better, sometimes the Thunder Hammer AoE can be stronger, but the Power Fist overall is just the best in the most scenarios, in my opinion. So for that reason, is at the top of S. Now, the next thing we have here is the Xenophase Blade for our heroic weapons. Now, the Xenophase Blade, I think this is the best balanced power sword in the game, because the heroic perk effect here is called Ancient Technology. This gives you a 20% damage buff on your power rakes, but it also gives you a wider angle on those power rakes. But contrary to popular belief, or I should say opposed to what most people actually think, this is not just a wider angle, it is also or horizontal angle, it's also a vertical angle. So your power rake's vertical angle is getting increased as well, is affected by this buff, which means you have a significantly easier time chopping Zoanthropes and Neurothropes and Lion Zangors out of the sky. And also the heroic tier here, or the heroic weapon effect here, helps out the horde clear a ton. So I would say this one is firmly A. I would say it's like, it's on the level of the other power sword. It's not like strictly better. I think it's like, it might be better than the balance options, but the block version of the power sword here is still better for things like Power World. The Xenophase is just better for like anti-air and stuff like that. So very strong options. They're pretty comparable though. Next weapon here is the Storm's Dominion. This is way worse than like most options for the Thunder Hammer. Now, the Storm's Dominion, a lot of people like this weapon because it puts out shock areas, but I'll be honest guys, this is one of the weakest heroic weapons in the entire game currently, mainly because the Thunder Hammer really wants like pure damage on the ground slam and aftershock, and that is where most of your attack damage really just comes from on this weapon. And even though the Storm's Dominion actually has the best stat spread for any fencing Thunderhammer option in the game, that being said, it is still weaker in like the block and balance options by significant margins. So for that reason, by a significant margin. So for that reason, Storm's Dominion, I would say, firmly goes into the C tier. The shock areas are not bad. Like with a Bulwark, with an Assault, you can do some goofy stuff, but like this is more of a gimmick effect than like a proper strong one, and the only time I ever find myself really using this weapon is with like Intimidating Aura or a Gunstrike build, because fencing on a Thunderhammer is just not that strong, and the normal Relic tier options are just generally better for balance and block by a significant margin, and that's pretty much all there is for this one. Next we have the Double Edge Relic. Now I know I misnamed it here, but this one, I would honestly go as far to say this one's also C tier. I think that it's kind of fallen off a bit. Now the funny thing here is that you have a combo skip on this weapon where you can skip to your stomp pretty easily. The heroic perk effect is called Fist Fight. You will go immediately into a punch instead of a kick on your Chainsword attack, and you will also have the option to skip to your stomp and use a double stomp with more heavy attack damage. So it is good for that. That being said, the new White Scars Chainsword is actually better for stomping than this weapon is, and also just better overall. And I would also say the balance window here really hurts this weapon. If this is a block weapon, it would feel way better, because the big issue here is a double stomp is pretty good in Space Marine 2 in theory. The issue comes that if you have a balanced parry window, you don't have the stagger of the Adrenaline Surge charges of the White Scars Chainsword, and because of that, you can't actually stagger the enemies into your stomp as easily. So a lot of times when you are using the Double Edge Relic tier here, or Heroic tier, it is just going to get interrupted all the time, which feels pretty awful. So for that reason, I would say it's more of a gimmick effect. It's not awful, just like the Storm Minion. It's just that it kind of underperforms compared to the better Relic tier options here. Next perk here, or next weapon here, is Death's Grasp. This is the Heroic Power Fist with the Heroic perk effect Follow-Up Shot. This gives you 200% bonus light attack damage and cuts your heavy attack damage in half, and you also get a Gunstrike opportunity after every single execute. So this weapon is really strong for new players. Like, the light attack damage here is very substantial. You will get a ton of armor back on armor reinforcement builds because of that, and this is a very strong weapon. Like, I think this one is firmly up here in the A tier. I do think it is weaker of like the block and balance fist, because these ones just like nuclear bomb bosses and stuff like that. But as far as like overall effectiveness is concerned for hard strats and operations, Death's Grasp is super easy to use, super effective, and when you build it around like armor reinforcement with all those gun strikes, you will have a very easy time in your game, especially against Tyranids. So really strong option. Next thing we have here is the White Scars Chainsword. This is one of the best melee weapons in the entire game right now. This gives you 3 Adrenaline Surge stacks. This is newly added to patch 13, and I have to say, the White Scars Chainsword is like up here in the S tier. It is significantly better than like all the Relic tier Chainsword options. The speed here gives you a ton of utility, and the damage here is top tier as well. It also allows you to do things like stagger enemies into your stomp attacks. This thing can like one combo Extremis and stuff like that. It is a top tier weapon in the game currently, and really, this is just one of the most entertaining weapons to use in the game, period. The speed increase here brings us back to like the Artificer Chainsword from patch 8 and below, and because of that, it just feels really fun to use this weapon. It does a ton of damage, it is good on all difficulties and all game modes, and having a block weapon like this is just super great to have in the game again. I think this one firmly goes up in the S, and is above most weapons in Space Marine 2 currently. Next weapon we have here is the Argent Edge. This also goes up in the S. This is the best fencing weapon in all of Space Marine 2, mainly because every single parry you do with this weapon will give you a Gunstrike opportunity, and a Gunstrike opportunity staggering an enemy, that is not only going to give you more Gunstrike perk effects, but you will also just have a way safer time against stun locks in the game, because some of the most annoying enemies in Space Marine 2 are things like a melee Terminator, things like a Lictor or a Ravener triple hit comboing you, where you can't just instantaneously, like, you know, get your parry off for a Gunstrike immediately, and you're stuck in these like combo chains that you're forced to block or parry. And this one, removing those enemies from their own combo chains, it is god tier for that alone, but also has a very high base damage, and you also do damage on every single parry. And the only downside of this weapon is that the actual block window here, or the perfect parry window, is closer to a block weapon, so it's a little bit harder to use for like newer players, but it is a top tier option. Definitely the best fencing weapon in all of Space Marine 2. Next weapon here is the Power Gladius. Now, the Power Gladius is, in my opinion, still a top tier weapon in Space Marine 2. It's definitely a top tier heroic option. I don't know if I'd firmly put it in the S tier overall. Actually, no, I definitely would, because the perk effect here is called Agile Strike. Every perfect dodge, you will get a 120% melee damage buff to your next attack with a 1 second lingering duration, and that can be stacked up to 3 times for a 360% damage buff. And on a class like Tactical, you can straight up one-shot a boss off Auspex and a double Shadow Stab with those stacks off in the proper setup, and that alone kind of puts it up here. This weapon has come in clutch so many times because in Space Marine 2, being able to damage nuke is such a potent effect, and this does that phenomenally well. The only issue I have with this weapon is that it is a balanced parry window, so it is overall like less safe than the Argent Edge. But that being said, if you're playing like a sniper or something, can go cloak, it's very easy to use. And also the melee damage here is top tier, and it's firmly above like every single combat knife option in the game, in my opinion. Now, the next weapon here is the Ultima Ratio. D tier, this weapon sucks ass. The Ultima Ratio is just a garbage weapon in Space Marine 2. The Omnissian Axe rush damage here is actually worse than the balanced version, on top of hitting like no breakpoints for your Mighty Blast perk to like double combo enemies. This is like such a gimmick weapon. It may technically be like the best fencing option for the Omnissian Axe, but fencing on the Omnissian Axe isn't that strong in the first place, so firmly down to D tier. This is probably not only like the worst melee weapon in the game, but also the worst heroic in the game, so for that reason, down here. And now that next weapon we have here is the Encarmine Power Axe. Now, this is a brand new Power Axe heroic variant in Space Marine 2 patch 13. The heroic perk effect here is called Sanguine Edge. You are able to store up your riposte after a perfect parry or perfect block. Well, in this case, it's perfect block because it's a block weapon. So you are able to store up your power backstep and use it on command with a heavy attack after a power stance, which is super nice. And the big thing here is you are giving up damage on the Relic tier option for the Power Axe and like doubling your speed on your attacks, and your cleaving potential here is tremendous. And like I said at the beginning of this video, you are able to hit more enemies now with Power Wave than you were in patch 12, and that affected this weapon a ton. You can really line up a huge power riposte on this weapon, and it's really fun to use. I would say the utility here is quite high. I don't think I would quite rank it above the standard Power Axe, but if you want to put this up in the S tier, it's pretty damn close. You know what, I'll put it up here because I think this one is pretty comparable to the other Relic tier options, and the Relic tier options are all in the S tier here, so it's kind of unfair to not put this one up here as well. I think these are all great choices, and that's pretty much all there is for the melee weapon tier list here, guys. I think this is a pretty fair placement of all these weapons currently. I really do think we should take a look at like these four at the bottom, the combat knife and Ultima Ratio especially. Like this weapon here needs like a whole perk rework, but for the most part, they're all in a pretty good spot. And like these ones just need like a bit of a buff to like their overall damage or just perk effects. Like maybe that would help out a bit, but the balance window here is holding this one back, and the shock area is just not remotely as damaging as it should be. And that's pretty much all there is for this one, guys. Let me know what weapon you think is best for the melee weapons here among the heroics and the relic tier. I know a lot of people have conflicting opinions, and just keep in mind, guys, just because something is up here in the S tier does not mean you cannot use the B tier Chainsword, does not mean you cannot use things like the normal combat knife. Use whatever you want in Space Marine 2. It is your game. You do not have to listen to me and just like only pick top tier options, because Space Marine 2 is not about just like grinding out the best possible build 24/7. The whole reason we have like, over a dozen melee weapons now for the heroic and normal relic tier is because it's just to give you more build variety, and more build variety is what keeps these games fun in the first place. Just keep that in mind. And if you like content like this, subscribe for more. And as always, thanks for watching. If you want to watch me live, to ask me questions about the game, or just come hang out, you can find me here on YouTube or on Twitch with a link in the video description, and also a link to my community Discord. Take it easy. Bye.